Hi, welcome to today's podcast. Today we have four special guests and they're from the Australian National Department of Young Scholarly Researchers. Why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, why not? So first of all, thank you so much for having us here today. It's truly an honor for us to be here. And we are the Andy's researchers. My name is Jamie.
And I'm Jia En.
My name is Kaijan.
And I'm Ethan.
Thanks for introducing yourself. Today we'll be talking about a very interesting country, and this country is the country of Mauritius. And we'll be talking on whether an Australian firm should be expanding their business into the Mauritian country. So a bit of research that I've done before we dive into the deep stuff. I found out that Mauritius is located 2,000 kilometers off the southeast coast of the African continent. And the population of Mauritius is approximately 1.3 million people, which is around 4% of the Australian population, which is 25 million people. Now, the political framework of Mauritius is a parliamentary democracy, and the legal system of Mauritius is derived from the French civil law and also the British common law. And the economic structure of Mauritius is a mixed economy, whereby there's a variety of private freedom, but there is also a centralized economic planning by the government. Since the independence of Mauritius, Mauritius has developed from a low-income agricultural-based country to an upper-middle-income diversified economy that based heavily on tourism, textiles, financial services, and also IT services. So, without further ado, let's dive into the deep stuff. Let's talk about the buzzword globalization. It is defined in the article of Global Strategy Journal that it is an increase of interdependence and also integration across economies and countries. So, Jamie, I know this is where you have done your research in. Tell us, how has globalization affected Mauritius?
I'm quite impressed to say that Mauritius is performing quite well based on the KOF Globalization Index, which measures three aspects, meaning economy, social, and political. And as of 2016, Mauritius scores 71.74 out of 100, which is the highest since 1970, so that's pretty good. And with the lifting of quantity restrictions on import quotas and reduction of import duties, there has been an improvement of living standard, as Mauritius people now have access to good quality and cheap products from China and Japan. And also an article from the journal states that connections with distant knowledge can be achieved via interpersonal ties, such as diplomatic ties and also the establishment of MNC corporations. So Mauritius has strong and friendly relations with several countries. Mainly one is United States, where they are providing foreign assistance to Mauritius in terms of security and maritime, security in the maritime. So as a result, there's a transfer of skills, of expertise and skills. So Mauritius are benefiting from the influx of technology, increase in productivity and efficiency. And besides that, Mauritius is also a member of World Trade Organization. Therefore, they are benefiting from several preferential trade benefits.
Wow, I'm impressed that such a small and secluded island, such as Mauritius, right, can benefit so much from globalization.
Yeah, I think some businesses might have underestimated the business opportunities in Mauritius, but globalization is not all good for them. For example, it exposes the local manufacturers to foreign competition. So the top exports from Mauritius is being sugar, and so with globalization, you're exposing these local manufacturers to foreign competitors from France and Brazil, who are able to produce sugar at a lower cost of production. And as of present, sadly to say that Mauritius' cost of production for sugar is actually quite high due to several reasons, due to the rockiness of some sugar land where they are not able to use mechanization. Therefore, the cost is so high. And if Mauritius would want to compete with them to maintain their exports, they would need to find a strategy to overcome that. So that's a very big issue for them.
I see. I hope Mauritius will figure out a strategy to compete with their competitors. I have one question for you, Jamie. Do you think that there will be more job creation in Mauritius since there's an increase of export volume due to globalization?
Theoretically, yes, but in the case of Mauritius, it's unlikely so, because the labor market in Mauritius is so competitive with like so many foreign labor coming in from China and Bangladesh who are willing to work for more, but were willing to work more for less. So but even with the development of the ICT industry, those jobs are often occupied by foreign labour who are highly skilled and they have more expertise. So it leaves fewer opportunities for Mauritius young graduates and creates an incentive for them to leave the country to establish their career elsewhere. And so eventually there will be a loss of culture, which is a very sad thing. But as a whole, we feel that Mauritius is a winner as a result of globalization because it's doing comparatively well when compared to other African countries.
Thanks, Jamie, for sharing with us. Let's dive into the second topic of today, which is the economic and human development. I know this is within your expertise, Jian. So tell us, how is the economic development in Mauritius?
So the economic achievement measurement that we're going to use here is gross national income, which is GNI. The PPP adjusted GNI of Mauritius is now 28.54 billion, making it one of the richest countries in Africa. And the GNI of Mauritius has been growing steadily for the past 2 decades.
Wow, it looks like Mauritius is doing pretty well, yeah? But what do you think are the factors of the economic achievement of Mauritius?
There are many factors contributing to the steadily growing GNI of Mauritius, but today we're just going to focus on 3 prominent ones, which are natural endowment, education, and also infrastructure. So for the first one, the cultivated land of Mauritius enables mass plantation of sugarcane and tea. Also the minerals such as basalt and lime contribute significantly to the economic development of Mauritius. And last but not least, the beautiful scenery of Mauritius promotes its tourism. And in terms of education index, Mauritius is ranked 63 out of 187 countries. This indicates that Mauritius actually has a huge potential in future development. And in terms of Mauritius infrastructure level, they are ranked 76 out of 160 in terms of the infrastructure index. And this suggests that they have already enough suitable level of infrastructure for further development. So overall, we conclude that Mauritius has great potential in economic development.
I see. So do you think, Jian, that Mauritius economy is considered a transition economy?
Instead of saying transition economy, I think the term emerging economy should be a better term to describe what is happening in Mauritius right now. So to move from developing to developed country, Mauritius government puts in a lot of effort in constructing a market-based system. So the first effort will be that they regulate to increase more opportunity for foreign direct investment. And the second one, they privatize many companies to promote effective competition among these companies in the industry, especially in telecommunication sector. And last but not least, they also constructed a very comprehensive national innovation framework to safeguard the intellectual property right. So from all these efforts, we can conclude that Mauritius government is encouraging free market in adapting to its emerging economy.
Okay. So the government of Mauritius is actually pretty open towards foreign direct investment, right? And I understand that a rapid growing economy is good for a nation, but does it necessarily mean that the people in Mauritius are achieving a higher standard of living, Jian?
Sometimes the economic development doesn't reflect the improvement of standard of living of certain nations. So to measure human development index is used, which is HDI. So the HDI of Mauritius is now 0.79, which puts the country in high human development category, which is impressive, and positioning it at 65 out of 189 countries. And between 1990 and 2017, the HDI of Mauritius increased from 0.619 to 0.79. That was a whopping increase of 27.6%. So overall, we will say that the HDI of Mauritius is pretty remarkable.
I see. Those are really good statistics. So in your opinion, Jian, is economic development or human development a more important factor for an Australian firm to consider while expanding into the Mauritian economy?
In my opinion, economic development is definitely of a greater significance to consider in this context. So human development should be considered if the HDI is extremely low. But in this case, the HDI of Mauritius is pretty outstanding. So an Australian firm were to expand its business in Mauritius, there should be enough human resource to support that. In contrast, the economic development should affect the decision in a greater extent. The elements such as purchasing power, output per capita, government's policy in accordance with economic development, these are the very essential elements in economic development to consider before an international expansion.
Thanks, Jian, for sharing with us. Those are really good stuff that you shared. Let's dive into the third part of today's podcast, which is the cultural distance. So, apart from economic and human development, culture is also a huge thing that we have to take into account. And I know, Jia En, you have done your research about it. So, do you mind sharing with us about the Mauritian culture?
So Mauritius is actually a culturally diverse country because there are many ethnic groups like Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and other religious groups. So given this cultural diversity, it actually may complicate the business model. So Australian firm coming from a single culture country background may have to put in more effort to avoid any cultural misunderstanding. So as for the language use, most of them actually speak their native language or French, but English is still the official language. So I believe that in terms of communication, there won't be any language barrier. Another important aspect will be education level. So as mentioned by Jian, Mauritius have moderately high education index. So foreign firms do not really have to worry about the skill or capability of employees because they are all like competent candidates.
Wow, it sounds like it's a wise choice for an Australian firm to enter into this market, right? Given that the Australian parent company won't face any language barrier, and also there is like competent business partners in Mauritius. So it's really good. But can you tell us more about their social structure?
So speaking of the social structure, we might want to look into Hofstede 5 cultural dimensions. So for these two countries, they actually share a few similar cultural dimensions. First of all, they are both demonstrate individualism as opposed to collectivism. And second, both of them embrace masculine value like they prefer recognition, status, and also material success. And lastly, they have moderate score on uncertainty avoidance. So these two countries' people, they are more rule-oriented and they prefer like structured organization. But there is also another two dimensions actually set them apart. Firstly is Mauritius is moderately high on power distance, so a strict social hierarchy is still present in their society. And second, Mauritians, they are more long-term committed, so they value long-term commitment towards organization and career, which is actually good for parents' company because this actually helps in employee retention.
I see. So Hofstede does provide a really good inside view on the people culture of a country. One last question for me. Do you think that Mauritius being one of the countries from the African continent, is it culturally more similar or more different from the culture of Australia?
So Mauritius being one of the South African countries, actually they are doing quite different with others like Botswana or Ethiopia. So Ronan and Shenka culture cluster theory is not really applicable here. And a business graduate from University of Cape Town, South Africa also mentioned in his paper that ethnic linguistic fractionalization is very common in South Africa. And the impact of cultural measure is significant. So Australian firm may want to do really in-depth country analysis before they venture into this market. So coming back to your question, I think that Mauritius is getting more culturally similar with Australia because they share a few similar cultural views. And culture similarity is positively associated with foreign subsidiaries performance. So I think it's a good move for Australian firm to venture into this market.
Thank you, Jian, for sharing with us. Let's move to the fourth part of today's podcast, which is David Ricardo's comparative advantage. And so, Ethan, the concept of comparative advantage is one that is very important to understand, right?
So that's quite correct, Anton. As Andy's researchers, it was imperative for us to determine which industries Mauritius should specialize in and which ones Australia should specialize in when looking to trade with each other and with the international community as a whole. So in order to do so, we had to identify and analyze the most prominent industries in each country and apply David Ricardo's comparative advantage theory.
I see. So Ethan, can you tell me more of what is Ricardo's comparative advantage?
So the crux of Ricardian theory is based on the idea that unrestricted trade and specialization is beneficial for all countries that engage in it. So this theory stresses that comparative advantage is extremely beneficial, and subsequently the pattern of trade arises from differences in productivity.
I see. So as a result, trade is seen to be a positive sum game, right? Where both parties involved are beneficiaries, is it?
That's correct. Consumers will be able to consume more given the lack of restrictions in trade, and nations can better employ their scarce resources for the production of goods that they have comparative advantage over.
Okay. So now that we have established what comparative advantage is, right, Ethan, how do we use it and how do we apply it to a realistic and non-theoretical situation?
Well, to be able to utilize the comparative advantages, we need to use the revealed comparative advantage index. The ICA is the most widely used index to calculate comparative advantage and focuses on export performance of a country. So we'll use the ICA in this comparison.
Okay.
It compares the total shares of a particular export with the shares of that export on the worldwide figure. So when a country possesses a positive RCA in a given product, it is considered to have an export strength in that product and is said to be a competitive exporter and producer relative to other countries.
Okay. So how does this apply to Mauritius and Australia?
So Mauritius is traditionally an agrarian-based economy. So its top three exports are raw and processed fish at 14%, sugar at 12%, and men's clothing at 11%. According to the Observatory of Economic Complexity, or the OEC, Mauritius exports 150 products in which it has a positive RCA for. So a positive RCA indicates a better comparative advantage. So the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development recorded that in 2017, the processed and raw fish had an RCA of 66.9, an RCA of 26.1 for men's clothing, and an RCA of 53.9% for sugar. Raw and processed fish and sugar was within the top three RCA values in Mauritius as a whole, with men's clothing around number 5.
Okay, so Mauritius should continue specializing in manufactured articles and food livestock industries when trading with other countries?
Exactly.
Okay. Alright. How about Australia? How do they compare to Mauritius?
So Australia as a country, due to its geographical environment, is quite rich in natural resources. Australia's top three exports are iron ore at 20%, coal at 19%, and gold at 12%. The OEC listed Australia as exporting 134 products in which it has a positive RCA for, and the UNCTAD recorded a 13.1 for coal, 17.7 for iron, and 29.0 for gold in the RCA values. So quite interestingly, the larger RCA values of Australia are actually more prevalent in other industries. So the top RCA values in Australia are milled cereals with an RCA of 76, cotton at an RCA of 53, and fruit and nuts with an RCA of 50, indicate that Australia actually has a significantly larger comparative advantage in the food and livestock industry than the crude materials industry. So however, Australia does have a larger proportion of its product exports with positive RCAs in the crude material industry, therefore making it still viable to specialize in.
Oh, therefore, we can say that Australia should specialize in food livestock industry and the crude materials industry when trading with other countries, right?
Correct. Australia should specialize in these industries.
Okay. There's a few limitations in using the RCA as a measurement, isn't it?
That's correct. The largest limitation of the RCA is that it doesn't account for rising industries and only considers those industries that are currently established.
Okay, so with Mauritius emerging as an internationally competitive destination for ICT as a result of structural reformation in the country and the ongoing trends in the service sectors, contributing to the 3.7% growth in the GDP in 2018, how will this affect Mauritius' comparative advantage?
Well, that's the problem that extends from the use of the RCA index as a measure of comparative advantage. I cannot say how the ICT industry will affect Mauritius' comparative advantage because economic literature and theorists fail to understand and comprehend the importance of services and comparative advantage. With a relatively small number of studies focused on comparative advantage measures in services trade. So especially with the recent developments in the global economy seeing a rise in the prevalence of service industries, this shows a fault in the use of the OTA.
Wow, those are really good stuff, Ethan. Thanks for sharing with us. So I think it's safe to say that Mauritius is a winner of globalization, and economic development is a very huge factor for an Australian firm to take into account. And also, an Australian firm should also take into account cultural distance when thinking about expanding into the Mauritian economy. And lastly, that the Mauritius should specialize in manufactured articles and food livestock industries when trading with other countries, and Australia should specialize in the food and livestock industry and also the crude materials industry when trading with other countries. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast today. Have a good day.